Yes, hello everybody, and welcome to Report Discussion Seminar and Review being presented by Karen Brain. Some of you on the call today won't know Karen, and perhaps just a few words about who she is and what she does. So Matrix Insurance Services Limited have been running an insurance scheme for small craft surveyors for a number of years, and I know Karen has a number of IMS members who actually insure through her. Karen is a non-practicing lawyer as well, or solicitor, I should say, and that comes very useful because she's always got a legal opinion for me when I ask her for one. So, Karen, we go back a long time now, 11 years. You're very much a friend of IMS.
Well, thank you, Mike, for organising all of this.
Loud and clear, Karen.
And that's brilliant. And I just mention at the beginning that I spoke with Mike today, and because it's going to be a very long talk, we're going to have a break at about an hour for those that need to grab a coffee or do something else, just for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll start again. And it'll give me time to refresh as well. And I'm sure some of you will appreciate a short break at about 5 o'clock. So we'll do that. Mike has kindly offered to sort of control the questioning because there's so many people on this call on this today. So Mike will be looking after that for me. And then hopefully we can get past page 2 or whatever today and deal with some of the aspects that I think are really quite important. Before I start the slideshow, I'm also going to mention that each slide I'm going to give sort of a minute or so for you to have a look at it, and it makes it easier for you to obviously put your thoughts together. And then I'm going to raise some of the questions and some of the issues that I've identified from a legal and also sometimes insurance perspective. But just before we get started on the slides, there's a couple of related issues in a way that they're related because of the terms and conditions. And I just want to remind everybody that this is something which is very important, is to understand what incorporation is in your terms and conditions into your contract with your client. And what crops up frequently is the fact that there's sometimes more than one document that forms the contract between yourself and your client. And the documents are not linked because one doesn't mention the other. So sometimes there's a scope of work document and then there's the terms of business that you use, but one isn't linked to the other. And the contract, the terms of business document often says that it's the entire agreement. So if you've got an entire agreement clause, it means that then, unless it refers to the other documents that you want to use, for example, if you've got one called scope of work, that won't be included in your terms of business with your clients. So do remember that, that's very important. And that is relevant to what I'm talking about, because as we go through, you'll see a number of times I will mention the fact that you should be quoting sections of your terms and conditions where appropriate, and you shouldn't summarize them. You should use the wording that is in your terms of business, in your contract with your client, exactly as it is. And the alternative is you refer to the section that's appropriate. But you'll see as I go through the talk, but that is very important. And therefore, if you haven't joined all the documents together to form your contract with your client, then some of those terms may be irrelevant and you may not be able to rely on them. So I just really want to mention that point before we get started. Right, so my usual talk has been done now. And I'd just like you just to take a look. We're going to look at a part of a survey that was undertaken on a wooden vessel many years ago. And if you just have a sort of a read of this slide, as I mentioned, just for a minute or so, and then I'll go into to talking about what has been discussed before. So, but I'm going to go quite quickly some of the comments that I raised at the last meeting in Scotland. Before I go through this, I'm also going to mention the fact that it's important that you're clear in the way that you structure your report that you're writing. You should keep your facts, your opinions, and your recommendations quite separate and make sure that they're clear. When I say separate, you make sure that they're in separate parts or preferably directly after what you've spoken about. So if you're dealing with a fact, it's easier for the reader then to go on to see your opinion and then to go on to your recommendation. And the one thing that I've noticed with a few people do, and I don't recommend this, is to summarise your recommendations. I wouldn't do that because you're then potentially changing the words and therefore could change the meaning as well. And sometimes clients will just go to a summary of recommendations and not read the whole report. And there could be a conflict if you're summarising. So we're taught as lawyers to always draw to the attention the fact that somebody should read the whole report if you do want to do some form of summary of your recommendations. But I wouldn't do personally. When I write a report from a legal perspective, we do tend to put our recommendations under one section, but then we're not dealing normally with such complicated issues that you may find as you come through dealing with individual points that you found. So I think from your perspective, it may be easier to keep the facts, the opinion, the recommendation in each section, so that the reader can read and understand from the facts. Right, this is a very detailed report. You'll see this is only part of it because I wouldn't have got through even a fraction of this beforehand. So it is very detailed factually. But if you'll notice here, if you read the first paragraph, it states the hull is of timber and Carvel construction, which is fine, it's factual. And it goes on to external surfaces are painted over and internal surfaces varnished over with grey paint in bilge areas. And then he goes on to say, accurately stating what timber has been used for the various components was not possible. That's fine, that's something which he's saying is not possible. That's been said. And it says broker's information states that the boat was planked in 3/4 Iroko and fastened with copper nails and ropes to Canadian rock elm steamed timbers. These materials could not be confirmed by inspection. However, planks, frames and stringers are copper fastened. And the one thing that we had a discussion on, and I've spoken to Mike afterwards, how do you know that it's accurate what broker information is? How do you know that they're copper fastened? You don't know unless it's tested. You can only assume by the colour that they are. And I wouldn't state it something is something unless you absolutely know. So if you so from a legal perspective, if one was looking at it, you'd probably want to write something of similar to the following. You'd probably want to write that the broker information states that the nails are copper, but this is not the metal has not been tested. So it makes it absolutely clear that you've looked at the information, and you can go on to say they appear to be of copper colouring, but you're not going to guarantee that they're copper nails. What could transpire, I don't know, but if you're stating something that you don't know is correct, then you shouldn't state it because you couldn't tell unless you tested it whether it was copper. It goes on to say fastening for keel and stem and stern timbers and steel strap floors, etc., believed to be mild steel, but this is not confirmed. So that is a correct statement because you're saying it appears to be, but you can't confirm it, so that's fine. And that is quite different from stating on the previous sentence that it's actually copper fastened, which you can't say for sure because you haven't tested the metal. The next paragraph, the phrase high standard is used. This is a nebulous word because everybody has a different opinion of what a high standard is, generally speaking, and therefore your client may have quite a different view of what he thinks is a high standard to what you think is a high standard. Therefore, I think it's important to stay away from the use of these sorts of words, being constructed to a high standard, because everybody's view of standard is quite different. Unless you wanted to somehow within the report put some sort of key to say what high standard means, but that I think would be quite difficult in the use of this phrase here, because you'd have to then put probably what high standard means for construction and what high standard means for certain other areas. So I would stay away from using those types of phrases. It then goes on to say, if suitably maintained, the material is identified or is stated as durable to moderately durable. Again, I think it needs an explanation as to what is considered to be durable and what is considered to be moderately durable, because again, it's everybody's opinion as to what is durable. Is durable 1 year? Is durable 6 months? And the reader, you must remember, probably has no knowledge of vessels and vessel construction, and you mustn't assume that they do. On that point, I think it's important to always remember that your client may or may not have certain knowledge, and you should always assume, and we're taught this as lawyers, that whoever you're dealing with, even if they appear to have some sort of knowledge of certain areas, you'll be surprised when it comes to any form of litigation, they will dispute that they ever knew anything and that they were totally reliant on your report. So when we deal with litigation, we have to assume whoever's reading it, even the judge, that they know absolutely nothing about the area that we're talking about in our reports or whatever we're producing for the court. And you should, and I think it's important that you should actually write in the same way. Don't write as if you are writing to somebody who has any form of knowledge, like a similar peer group to you. you must assume that they know absolutely nothing about it. And therefore, as I go through, you'll notice that I think it's important that you don't use phrases that may only be understood within, you know, the area or somebody who would have been doing a similar job to you. And I think it's important that you go back and reread and make sure that anything that you've written, you can identify if you've used a phrase that is more something that a marine surveyor would understand. So it is very, very important to make sure that you do not use what to you may be a normal word in the area of business, but it isn't to others. Right. So we've been through the issue of technical terms. You'll notice here, again, with the other paragraphs, the thickness is not confirmed, but believed to be approximately 20 mil, transom is 25mm planking. I don't know how they decided that the transom was 25mm planking. I would have put an explanation there to say how I knew. And going on from the previous point that I made, if you're going to use third-party information to confirm what you believe to be correct, you should state where you've got the information from. So, for example, if the 25mm planking came from a scope of design, then I would say there that the transom from whatever document it is states that it's 25mm planking. And if you've actually checked it, then I would state there that it's been checked by yourself, and how you've checked it as well, I think is important, or at least keep a note somewhere how you've checked it. And going on to the next paragraph, it says the steam timber frames are generally 45 to 30mm and approximately 190mm centres. I would again put in there, or at least put somewhere, or keep a note somewhere of how you decided they were 45 by 30mm and approximately 190mm centres, so that if there's ever a dispute because there's a problem that it's caused, so they weren't 45 by 30mm, you can prove that you've either checked them somehow, or wherever you've got the information from, put the source down. So it's really important to list the source. And this is something which you'll note if you ever read an expert's report, a report that goes to court, they have to put all their sources in. And if you don't do, then you've got no proof of how you decided that something, for example, again, is 45 by 30mm for the timber frames. It says again, the beam shelf, it says it's 130 by 35mm. Where did that come from? And it goes on to say that the strings are approximately 60 by 35. And again, the reference to copper fastenings, how would you actually know they're copper? If you do know, or you're using what appears to, or you're using a third-party information, something like the design, then you should state that that's where you got the information, but you can't confirm it. Okay, going on to the next slide. I'll leave you to just have a minute's read, and then I'll just go through it. So I hope you all had a chance to have a very quick read through it. The same principles applied to this part of the report. I would always say where you have obtained the information, the facts that you're putting in your report. If the plywood and the sawn timber information came from a document, then I would refer to the document. And if you've checked it and done measurements, whatever, then I would put it in to say that I've measured this, or this was measured, or we did a certain bit, or at least keep in a separate contemporaneous note how you undertook the checks to decide that you're going to put the information that's contained in the report in the report. So, if deck beams are 45 by 40mm and 60 by 40mm, did you measure them? Did you get it from, again, third parties' information? And it's important that you keep a note somewhere of how you've decided to put that information in. So if you having read through this, you can see it's exactly the same points that I've raised, and it's also important that you do actually say, make some opinion on it as well, rather than leaving, I think, the opinions right to the end. Should you be making an opinion on the deck beams, etc., and at what point and where do you place your opinions? Do you want to do it afterwards, or are you going to put it under each point that you find? Is it standard construction for this type of vessel? Is it what you expected? And are there going to be any problems because of your findings? And I've just got one comment here about, again, galvanized steel hanging knees. How would you know they're galvanized? You can say it appears to be galvanized but not checked, because you're not tested that it's galvanized steel. And obviously there's different types of galvanized steel as well. Okay, if you just want to have a quick read through 2.1.2, the shell, the external shell, and then I'll just run through some of the points that I've identified. Okay, I'm going to go through this. And this is in this part of the report, it just provides a few examples of some of the points that I've already raised. We start with the external shell was sounded and inspected and found to be free from signs of distortion or major damage, all sounded true. I don't think people will understand what sounded means. So if you're going to use it, either put an explanation somewhere or alternatively don't use the word and explain what you've actually done. It was obviously relevant because it was put into the report, but a client, I would say, wouldn't understand what sounded means. So it is important to explain what you've done and put it in basic English. When we're taught as lawyers, we're always taught to think about the man on the omnibus or the woman on the omnibus. And you have to consider that, as I said before, that they don't know anything. And that's the way the judge would look at reading a report. So if the judge read this, he wouldn't have a clue what sounded meant. And if that was one of the causes of action because something had been missed because of the way it was sounded, it would be very relevant if it's not explained exactly what you did. So do explain and don't use technical terms. And again, major damage. What does major damage mean? It may mean something totally different to you as it would to your client. So that needs a clear explanation of whether it's important, not important what you found. And I think and you have to decide yourself how you like to write and how you like to structure your report. But using what I call nebulous terms, unless they're defined, things like major damage, it's not going to mean anything to any of your clients because they won't know what you have in your head as to what you consider major damage, but they may have formed their own view on what they think you're talking about. So do make sure that you make it absolutely clear. And then it goes on to say, all planking and plank hood ends fore and aft sounded true and securely fastened when tap tested, except for slight dull sounds from forward hood ends, second and third plank up from keel fairing, peaceful forward to port, no action essay, but monitor. I think this would worry me if I received that. I probably wouldn't understand what the dull sounds, the cause was. And if you don't explain sufficiently, you'll find some clients will come back and you'll have constant questions over your report. So it's important that things like slight dull sounds, I would be worried if I was buying a vessel and it has slight dull sounds and it says, and it says monitor. I wouldn't think, well, do I have to monitor? What do I have to do? I'd probably be on the phone asking my surveyor saying, well, what do I need to monitor? How frequently do I need to monitor? When do I need to monitor? So it's lots of questions it would raise to me if I'd read the report and actually taken some interest in it. So I think it's important that you make it absolutely clear. So if action is necessary, that you do actually say when, what timescales, and I think that's really important too.
Karen, it's Mike just butting in here. Simon May has put an interesting chat up, which made me laugh as much as anything else, but where are we? Let's just stick this out. He says, the common man on the omnibus is now in an Uber and connected to AI.
God bless him.
That, but it's true.
Yeah, I know, but you can't trust AI. This morning I got 3 different answers from it.
Well, there you go. It just adds to the problem, doesn't it?
AI does add to the problem. I actually am so concerned about AI not being accurate yet because they haven't completed, and I think it's going to be a few years, that the information that is put up, I would never rely on. I don't think it's reliable because it's drawing from inaccurate information. It's going to have to learn itself. And I this morning, just over jurisdictional issues, I put something in because I was asked a question and I got 3 different answers. So I don't think it's accurate enough at this point.
And I think Josh adds a very good comment, which is that AI will not hold up in court. And I suspect at this time he's entirely right.
I think so. It'll be a long while before. It took about 2 decades before the courts would accept scanned documents. And that tells you how long it was. And some of our judges out there will be there for a long while and will not accept AI in any fashion as to what the norm. They'll expect proof in a different fashion. If it took 2 decades for them to accept scanned documents into court, I think it's going to take a lot longer before they actually accept anything else. So I'd be careful with AI. I think it will be good in the future, but at the moment it's not. Right, just going back to paragraph 1. Again, the same things, all planking and plank hood ends fore and aft sounded true. Well, what does that mean to an individual? You have to explain it. And keep a note of how you did the testing as well. Make sure you keep it somewhere. One of the cases that we had was lost because somebody couldn't prove how they sounded, and what method they used. Whereas the expert for the claimant made it absolutely clear that it was every meter he did, and he did a drawing, and there was nothing that we had contemporaneous that could prove what the marine surveyor had done to test the hull. and that was one where we had an issue with rot, and therefore, obviously payment had to be made because we couldn't prove we hadn't been negligent in the testing. And if you want to explain what tap tested is, I would explain what tap tested is. What are you tapping with? Again, where are you tapping? Have you got a clear plan? And have you had to tap around somewhere else more carefully? And just make sure it's absolutely clear to the reader. The top side, it says recently painted in white gloss. I don't know what recently means. Would I want to know? Probably would want to know. How do they know it's recent? Is it because it appears to be recent? Then I would say, visually it appears that it's been recently painted. That's what I would say. You're stating facts. Make sure it is factual. For my opinion, it appears to be recently painted with a white gloss, with blue gloss, raised, sheer streak plank. And again, paint application relatively recent. I just say it appears from visual inspection that it's been, the application has been recent, and by this I mean within such and such a period of time. It says initially a very good finish, but cracking noted along plank joints. Well, I would then, if I was reading this and I was the client, I was thinking, well, is it a good finish, or has it got cracking? Does the cracking mean that it's now not a good finish, or was it initially when it was actually painted a good finish? So make sure when you go back to read it, that you remove any superfluous words. It was either good finish or not a good finish, if you're going to state it. Are you going to say in your opinion, in vast majority of areas the finish is good, but cracking was noted along plank joints in the port, or just it says especially to the port? Does it mean it was elsewhere? So again, make it clear when you're actually writing as to where the cracking is. And also, obviously, if you've got cracking, make sure you keep plenty of photographs as well, but make sure it's clear to the client. And do they have to do anything? And what period of time do they have to do it within? Because you found something. So the principle that you should follow is, if you found anything that you need to comment on, because you need to comment because there's some deterioration, you need to give a timescale, or you need to say, deal with this at the next service, follow the service history if you feel you need to tell them that. But make sure it's clear. So here we've got cracking along the plank joints, especially to the port. When do they have to do something? And and who should be checking it? Should they just be visually checking it, or would you suggest that they consider getting an expert to check? And as I said again before, time periods. Put time periods in, because a lot of complaints and a lot of claims have come from the fact that they say, oh well, the surveyor didn't say when I had to check it. The surveyor didn't say when I had to do such and such, or what I might have to do. So do make sure you place that in if you identify anything. And again, the same applies to the next paragraph. To port, some lifting or paint at joints at second plank down, especially around after window cracks at other joints, also visible lower down, especially aft. Again, would you want to comment there? Do they need to check around the window? Is there a possibility of leaking because of the lifting paint? I don't know. It probably raised the question. I'd probably telephone the surveyor to say to them, what do I need to do? You said around the window. Is it going to cause a problem? And we've got the next paragraph, slight cracking to paint at stern at joint just above waterline. This is visible from both sides, indicates some movement at the joint. Monitor condition. How do I monitor? Am I capable of monitoring a condition? When will I know it's bad enough? I don't think I would be capable of knowing at what point I should be asking somebody to do something. So should you be saying it needs to be monitored and checked by somebody who knows what they're doing, basically? You need to phrase it, I think, in that way, or suggest it is done by somebody who knows what they're looking at. And I think that's really, really important, that you do actually say that, that it has to be somebody who does know what they're actually doing. Right, we're on to the next part of the shell external. I just want to take a quick read of that. I'm going to repeat again because I think it's important. The same principle. How important is the finding of that first paragraph? I think you need to tell the reader, and because I would start to get worried at this point, because I wouldn't know if if the cracking is really important or not important, and what I should be doing to do with those lines. The next part, this is topside acrylic windows and port lights spared in and paint applied up to acrylic. Is that just a factual statement? Does it matter? Is it as expected? It's just that obviously it's a factual comment. you just want to state why you're saying it. Is it important or is it not important for me to know that there's acrylic windows? Do I need to do something with them or don't I need to do something with them? And again, paint cracking at the plank butt joint immediately after of the after window to the port. Do I need to do something with it? Does it matter? How long do I need to leave it? Do I need to check it? They're all questions which I think are important that you address. You said these, it says these cosmetic defects are relatively minor and only really visible close to. What does it mean by relatively minor? What will it mean to your client? What does it mean to you? You're probably going to again same principle. You're going to have a different opinion probably as what relatively minor. When should they be looked at? Should it be dealt with at the next service time? Is there a service time for this type of vessel? Depends on what is what the facts are at the time. So I think you need to tell your client that they're relatively minor now. They don't need any further work done, but recommendation is that this needs to have to be looked at, or however you want to phrase it, and may need some repair work undertaken within the next 12 and 24 months, 3 years, whatever you're going to say. But make sure it's clear. Now the NB here, to restore, it says to restore the look of the top side, repainting will be required, but if there is movement in planks and joint flow is not flexible, cracking of paint along the joint lines will likely reappear. I think it's important to make sure, as I said before, that you separate out your facts, your opinion, and the recommendations. And as we go on and we see a few other NBs, I'll draw this out again, and perhaps if anybody wants to have some discussion on it, I'm happy to go through at a later stage once we get a little bit further in on the presentation. But do you need an NB there? I think it's important to keep your facts and as I've said, your opinions and your recommendations quite clear. And I'm not quite sure what the NB puts into it, so I wouldn't use it. If you want to make the comment about what needs to be done, then put it into a recommendation. If you want to give an opinion on something, I would probably say, in my opinion, to restore the look of the top side of painting will be required. That's what I would say, because it's your opinion to restore the look of the top side, or if you want to use a different phrase regarding that, you don't want to put it as an opinion, then you'll need to change it and rephrase it to say normal practice to restore the top look of the top side is to repaint. And then you want to go on to say, well, when do they need to repaint? How long do they leave it? Can I leave it for 4 years before I repaint? I think it's important to make sure it's absolutely clear to the reader. And again, going on about joint filler, if it's not flexible, I would say normal practice is to use flexible filler, because non-flexible normally, or whatever you want to use the phrase, normally cracks along the lines, and therefore would then reappear. Or you might want to say it would be appropriate to use a flexible filler. So I think it's important the way you phrase to your client, what do you think needs to be done, if you think it's appropriate to include it in the report. Right, we're on to the next one, if you want to have a quick read. Okay, I notice time is passing by, so I'll try and be a little bit quicker going through this. Now, first paragraph. I'm sure now you've all identified what I'm probably going to talk about. It says here, anti-foul generally smooth and even applied, but has been applied with little or no primer and flaking off easily. Do you know it's had little or no primer? How do you know? And I think, again, goes back to the importance of explaining what you've done to identify why you think there's little or no primer, and it's flaking, and why it's flaking off easily. Coatings are very thin. How do you know the coatings are very thin? These are all important points. I put the words, and then my next question was, so what does this mean to your client? What should your client be doing? Should they be taking any action now before if they take it out of the water, before it goes back in the water? And it is important that you tell them. And just on that point of saying about whether the vessel is in or out of the water, it's always important. It is important that you tell a story. And I know I go on about this every time I talk. But before you even go into other factual points as to what you found, what you haven't found, you should tell the story about whether the vessel was in or out of the water when you surveyed it, or whether it was in first and then taken out, how long it had been out, and if that has any effect on your findings. And we've had problems in the past where a vessel has been out for a long period of time and it appeared dry, but had it been looked at by the expert immediately it had been taken out, they would have found a lot more problems with it. And it did end up with a quite substantial payment out, because they should have recommended that they also had it checked whilst in the water, or put in and taken back out, whichever way, because they weren't able to confirm water ingress, and that did cause quite a financial loss to them and insurers. So do make sure that you tell the story, and do make sure that what you think the consequences are, and what you can and can't comment on in terms of perhaps water ingress, or some other point that you would normally be able to say with confidence. Right, the below waterline planking is obvious. I wasn't quite sure if that was relevant, or whether it was supposed to say that it's got planking below the waterline. Relevance to your client, I don't know what relevance is to that, apart from stating what its construction is. If it was going to be the construction below the waterline is planking, then that's just factual. Then it goes on to say the seams have been caulked and filled, but anti-fouling paint is flaking, cracking along all the below waterline joints. Filler below looks like putty. Is it important that it's putty? Should it be putty? I don't know. It says hardened and cracking where exposed. Here you see that what's been added on is the raking out and repaying with the suitable flex and sealant recommended. Timescale, is it a timescale? Should it be before, if before it goes back in the water? I don't know. And therefore I would be asking the question, when do I need to do it? And I don't know, has it caused any problems because it's already cracked? I don't know. I'll be asking those questions. Rust streaks noted on many steel strap floors, fastening port and starboard. External fastenings are covered by timber plugs. The first thing, is it important that there's rust streaks? Does it mean that the strapping to me needs to be replaced? Is it just cosmetically causing a problem? I think that needs to be addressed. And again, that would be something which I would want to know about if I was purchasing a vessel, if that being commented on. Externally, fastenings are covered by timber plugs. Yeah, is that good or bad? I don't know. Questions raised, I would be asking probably the surveyor, do I need to do anything? Should they be covered by timber plugs? Do I need to check them? Do I need to take the timber plugs out to check that the fastenings are still okay? Again, that's something which it would raise a question with me. Some plugs noted to be working loose, but most visible were secure. Is it important that some are loose? And should you be commenting that you could only check those that were visible on X, Y, and Z? There's a lot that may be not visible, and you can comment on them. They're questions which I think are important to be addressed. It says where rust stains noted seeping around the timber plug, the surrounding timber was spiked. I don't know what spiked means, and that would need to be explained. And is it important that they were spiked? But because I don't know what spiked means, I don't know whether I should be doing anything or not doing anything. Does it mean that he was spiking them? Where rust stains noted seeping around the plugs, the surrounding timber was spiked. I'm assuming it was checked with a spike by the surveyor, but I wouldn't make that assumption. I'd need to ask. At some plugs, softening of the timber noted and some signs of electrochemical decay. Further investigation recommended. Are we recommending just for the electrochemical decay? Are we recommending for the whole lot? Because everything is in the same paragraph. So separation is very important when you're dealing with things. So if I was splitting this up, if I just wanted to talk about the electrochemical decay, I would separate that out and put that as a separate paragraph with us writing it legally. I would say some plugs softening of the timber noted and some signs of electrical decay, and this requires further investigation by an expert or by somebody within a time period. So everything that you've identified, is it relevant or not relevant? Because the reader needs to know. Right. And this goes on to discussions that I've had with Mike and others as well, Paul, Homer and Jeff, about using some sort of chart, also sometimes as relevant as to the importance of perhaps timescales, if you want to do it that way, if you don't want to write it longhand into the report. Right, to the next page. Now this is the recommendations here. I think I would, because of the way I write, I would probably put the recommendations next to everything that you find. I think it's easier for the reader. And I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that I'm the client. After reading something, I'd have to go back otherwise to reread it. I would say that it's important to do with the recommendations and the opinions as you go through and identify parts, because it's easier, I think, for the reader. When I write a report to insurers, it's different because I've identified things, and I might then I might say, please refer to recommendation, and then I will make it quite clear at that point to go back to the recommendations section. Or if I don't feel it's relevant because it's a short report, I will then put all my recommendations, but my recommendations are not a summary of the recommendations in the body of the report. They are full recommendations set out, and there's normally only 4 or 5 or 6 at that point. I think when there's more recommendations, it's better to include it within the report itself. And unless you find it difficult to write in that fashion, then always refer to recommendations, because it will then tell your reader that there is a recommendation relating to the paragraph in question, and that it's important that they read that recommendation, because that recommendation will normally include some sort of work check, whatever needs to be done. So let's have a quick look at it. There's no timescales here. Replaced when. Condition of timber around hull should be assessed and grading pieces fitted as necessary. I'm not sure what necessary means. Do I need to get somebody to decide what's necessary as the buyer? And I think it sort of raises questions. Right, 213. Okay, we're looking at access restricted here. This is where I'm going to start drawing in the issue of your terms and conditions. I would make it clear, if I was writing this report, that there's certain areas that you won't comment on, and I would refer to my terms and conditions. So if I was going to mention about access restricted, I would say access was restricted in whatever you want to explain, and then say we refer you to 6.1 of our terms and conditions, which states that we do not, and then quote it as it is in your terms and conditions. It makes it safer. You can summarize it. It causes a problem, I think, in my opinion. But if you do want to summarise, make sure you refer definitely to the term in your contract with them. And access restricted by interior joinery. Which parts were restricted? I would probably say I couldn't access this, I couldn't access that. And make it clear what you couldn't and could not see. On the point, we will go further on as we go into this discussion about engines. But I'm going to make the comment now because it's a similar sort of ilk. A number of times I've seen in the terms and conditions of business contract with the client, it says we will not be commenting on engines or whatever, we will not be commenting on soft furnishing. And then there's a comment in the report. I would say under any section of soft furnishings or whatever, we do not comment on soft furnishings and refer you to 8.3 of our terms of business. So it makes it so they can then go back and make sure that they know that there's a specific term, and they've then got an opportunity to go back and read it, and it explains what you are and are not doing. Okay. It says here, it says screwed in place boards, tanks, machinery, and quantity of gear aboard. And I've made a comment here, and to expand on it. But you'd have to decide exactly how much you need to put into that part. Do I have a question, Mike?
You do. I was just about to jump in. Tony says, surely a report should be written in the past tense. I'm not comfortable saying something is okay.
Well, it depends how you phrase it at the beginning. That's interesting in discussion. This part, we had this discussion in Scotland. If you're writing the report, I write in present and past tense. It's mainly past tense, but it depends on how you actually phrase it. If you're at the beginning of the report, you'll say, these are my findings are as follows on such and such a date, and you're going through. You've got to make sure that it's clear from the client that what you're saying is on the day that you had your MOT done on it. And at the time that the MOT is found, because that's what you're doing an MOT on this vessel, you make it quite clear that it's at the time. So you say, if you want, depending on how you're using or how you're phrasing it, you have to make it clear that your following comments are comments on your findings on the day. And you can put that on the first part or whatever it is. So whatever you say and in whatever tense you use, you've made it perfectly clear at the beginning that the following comments, your factual findings, are based purely on your survey on the day. And that is sufficient for well, I'm going to say subject to how you're actually writing, but that should be sufficient for a judge to say, no, these are just the factual findings. He's made it quite clear, and she's made it quite clear. Paragraph 1 of the report. These are the factual findings on the 24th of November 2025. And then it's made it clear to any judge that these are your findings on the day, however you phrase it, whatever mistake you make through your report, they're absolutely clear. You've told the judge who's reading it, and that is it. and that should deal, and unless you've done something strange within the way you've written to counter what you've said at that point, it's telling the judge that you are writing this, and and therefore it's perfectly clear. My findings were as follows. You could put Shelley internal. You could start every one with my findings were as follows. I was unable to do X, Y, and Z because it was, screwed in place, and therefore I couldn't do such and such. The four and the half peak, were limited access. But you can go on to say, but they are of a good quality, because you can say that they are, because they are factually at the time that you did it, they are perhaps of good quality, and by good quality I mean such and such. Because you're saying that exactly at that time, Mike. But yes, past tense is generally better, but you can use are because you found them at that time. But it's entirely what you feel comfortable with and how you have to.
Yeah, like I said, Tony, I hope that helps. If not, do come back.
Yeah, it's the way you structure it, Mike, and to make it absolutely clear. And if you think that you're giving it to a judge that knows nothing about what you're doing, but judges are also, they are intelligent people, and unless you are phrasing something in such a way that it counters the fact that you are making a comment purely on the day that you undertook the survey, then they will take that into account. But that depends on how you're phrasing it. But you just need to make sure that if it has to go to court, that whoever's reading it, it makes it absolutely clear that it's your findings on the day, unless you want to make a comment specifically because after doing the survey you may have found additional evidence for something, and you then wish to make the point that you did some research and on X, Y, and Z shows such and such. So although I found such and such at the time, I'd like to make the point. You can you just have to make sure it's factually clear as to what the facts are. The date that your facts relate to. I don't know whether that's clear. I think that's clear on this one. So I wouldn't necessarily get hung up about past and present tense. It depends on what the sentence is, and whether you've made it clear that every one of your comments relates to your findings on the day that you undertook the survey. Right, on the second bit, in some areas such as the fore and aft peaks, due to rigged canvas flats, there was limited access for close visual inspection. Parts did not be reached for close inspection or spiking. Again, do you want to explain more on that? I think it probably needs more explanation. The bilge comment, I don't know the relevance of that. It just seems to be a factual comment. They were painted grey. Was that because it covered something, or it was just a factual comment? It's probably not relevant at all, but it says finish is generally good and bilge and lock-up areas mostly clean and dry. Is that important to me as a client to know? Should I be, and generally good? I don't know what that would be to you or to me as a client. Let's look at the next bit, hull planking. We'll just go to the bottom bit there. Monitor when the boat is next to float. I don't know, should I be monitoring it? I'm not sure how I would monitor it. Am I just looking for possible leaks? Should I be? I think sometimes it's important. It says monitor when the boat is next to float. I probably would say recommendation that you check the area. I don't know, before doing X, Y, and Z. And I'd probably put it that way, and then check. I would say check before use every time. I think that's important. We're putting a time frame into it. And we've dealt with the issue of copper fastened again. It's knowledge. How do you know it's copper? Okay. Right, we are on to surface corrosion. I'm going to whiz through the next couple of slides quite quickly because I'd like to get onto the GRP stuff area. So this one, I highlighted the word believed serviceable. I would probably phrase that differently because I'm not sure what it tells the client. These believed is serviceable, but service corrosion should be cleaned off and underlying condition assessed. I don't know what that phrase means, serviceable. So you'd need to explain that if you want to use that phrase. I would change it to say exactly what you mean. Should anything, does it mean that you can use it and the service it should be cleaned off? When should it be cleaned off? Should it be done now? Is this replaced as necessary? Again, necessary. I don't know what the word necessary means to people. It might mean a quite different to me as it might do to the expert. So it's important that you actually say exactly what needs to be done as a recommendation, because that is obviously a recommendation there. because it's got placed as necessary. Right, still fastenings again, we've already discussed that. And on the next paragraph, it says all sounded true. I would explain that to a client. And coming down to the last part, it says of the paragraph that I'm looking at, surface rust when noted on floors and furniture should be cleaned off immediately. When? Again, timescales and underlying condition of the fastenings assessed or treating with suitable anti-rust coats such as zinc-rich paint. I've put a question here. You know, does anything need to be replaced? You know, or you know, if anything is found, and I think that needs further explanation. And going down to the last paragraph, again, you know, timescales. What's the timescale on the last paragraph? A few sample fastenings in various areas of inspection is recommended. You know, when should it be done? Should it be done now? Does it need to be done in a year? You know, I think timescales are very important for clients because then they'll understand what their expenditure is. And on the point of expenditure, I don't think a number of clients, I won't say how many, but a number of clients actually understand the cost of keeping a boat in good repair or repairing a boat that they've purchased. And this is when the claims come in because they get such a shock. And that's why I think it's very important to get them to, you know, consider timescales. And you can't necessarily put in costs because I don't think a surveyor knows sufficient about the costs of doing certain jobs. And you may need to say that they may wish to check what the costs will be for undertaking X, Y, and Z. I think it's important, and I think that's relevant for a lot of the comments I've made earlier on, that costs should be drawn to their attention, that they may wish to get an idea of what the costs are going to be for the recommendations that you've put in your report. Okay, coming on to the next slide now. We're talking about the cracked frame, first paragraph. You'll notice there it says further investigations recommended. Again, timescales. I think it's important to put it in. And when it goes on to say cracked frame should be replaced or doubled up, and it says doubling up is the easier option. Okay, that's in your opinion, or opinion of the writer. Access to the frames and bilge areas in the way of engine and further aft is greatly restricted, and much of the structure cannot be closely checked. And so, what did you find? Did you need to comment? What were you know, what is the relevance of what you couldn't check? So I think it needs further explanation. You know, you have to say what you could not do, and I think that's very important when you're writing a report. And the next paragraph, we've got the two words I've highlighted is condition assessed, and I put a note next to this again, timescale. But it says where accessible, the strap floors and fasteners were tap tested and found to be sound, but surface corrosion should be cleaned off, condition assessed, and suitable anti-rust coatings applied. And again, the word necessary has been used there, which I've already commented on. Right, here we've got the recommendations separate. I've already commented on what you know, from a client's point of view, I think it's good to keep recommendations where you've found and identified the problem, because it's easier for the reader, particularly somebody who is not an expert in the field and is a layman. Again, if you read through these, you can see there's no timescales, and I think it's important that there should be some timescales through there. And again, the NB is used. I probably wouldn't use NB. If you're going to put it as a recommendation, then put it as a recommendation or put it as an opinion somewhere. If your opinion is that all internal areas, you know, should be kept well ventilated, then, you know, or whatever it is, then put that somewhere else. I don't think it should be under the recommendations. So, as I've said before, keep your facts, your opinions, and your recommendations quite clear and quite separate, and don't muddle more than one fact that you need to comment on in recommendation with a recommendation in one paragraph if you need to make it clear what your recommendation is referring to. We're on for GRP structures. Again, this is all very detailed. The comments are in here about most of the findings. I think it just really comes same principles as the previous report. This is a different report for the GRP vessel structure. just remember about, as I said, separation, referring to your terms and conditions. And I'm just going to go through and identify very quickly on some of this, because otherwise we won't get through it, Mike. You'll see on the second paragraph the word sounded again. I would obviously make sure it's clear what that means. Always make sure and inspected. Make sure you keep somewhere at least how you inspected. Did you do it every meter? You know, your method of working. Keep a contemporaneous note somewhere so that can be used in the future should you have a problem of proof as to how you actually did your checking.
Karen, I'm just going to jump in. Our good friend Clayton Leighton has popped something up to say, would you recommend including photographs taken during the inspection in the report to support and clarify the findings?
We've discussed this, and I don't think it's. If you're writing and you're giving it to insurers and the purpose is different, then yes, but I wouldn't do it. We've had an instance where a photograph has been included, and then what it showed was something else that hadn't been commented on. So I would keep your photographs for your benefit should there be a problem, but I would only provide your written opinion and recommendations. I think that's a safer option, and I think it would probably keep you probably safer from complaints from your client about areas you didn't comment on. It won't stop claims, but it will prevent them from inferring that you were negligent because you only commented on one thing, but the photograph clearly shows something else. So I wouldn't include photographs after many years of discussion with Jeff, yourself, and Paul, and a few others. I think it's dangerous to do that.
Okay. Actually, Paul, just before we leave that subject, Paul Hammond has popped up. Good question. All three surveyors, some of you won't know, we held a practical course last week down at Lyme Regis with a dozen people. Paul was one of those there. All three of the surveyors, they were the tutors at the practical session, said exactly what Karen just explained. Keep them to yourself was the best advice.
Excellent, good. These are people agree. I think it is important because otherwise, they'll just use it in the litigation, and they'll use photographs that are not relevant to their course of action, but they'll use them as to infer that the individual was not competent in their job. So I think it's best to keep it just to yourself, and I don't, you'll only release what's relevant to what they say their allegations are. So yeah, absolutely. Right, I've highlighted the. Look at the second paragraph here. It says generally free from damage. I'm not sure. Again, same comment. Generally free. What does that mean to an individual? For a small area of impact damage to the lower transformation of the starboard of the centre line with arcs of related to stress cracking. What do I need to do about it? I'm sitting as the client. Do I need to do something? Not do something? When do I need to do it by? It says the damage penetrates through to the laminate with signs of distortion and penetration internally. Repair required. It says repair. Do you want to suggest at that point? That sounds quite a lot of money to me. I'm not sure. Are you going to suggest that before purchase you get an indication of what the cost would be to repair it? I don't know. Depending on what your findings were, what is the relevant comment to your client? Should you be drawing their attention? I would say yes. If that was going to be a very expensive repair, or even one of a number that's going to add up, then I would say, recommendation that I don't know, boat builder, expert waivers, you may wish to consider a boat builder, etc., to look at, and to give a cost estimate on the repairs. I think that would be very helpful to your client. Okay, moving on to the recommendations. Again, these have been separated out. It says an early maintenance opportunity. I think you should still put a timescale in, because somebody's idea of an early maintenance opportunity could be 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, unless it specifies in some document. Then I think you should refer to perhaps the document and say, if you have knowledge of it. It says preferably before putting to sea again. I would remove the word preferably. Has it got to be done before putting it to sea or not? Because that could be very relevant to safety. I don't know. So I think it's important to be positive on that point. The next part of that of the recommendation goes on to say what they think should be done. I probably put in my opinion, in opinion, of the writer that this should be ground back to sound laminate and hard made good with a layout, fresh glass, full filling, etc. But you should take advice from X, Y, and Z, and to do the costs. And again, make sure you're going to separate your recommendations out, that you haven't, the way you phrase it doesn't contra what you've put into anything above. That's why I tend not to separate things out and suggest you don't, because you could be not duplicating, because it wouldn't be a complete duplication. You're writing something in a different way, and therefore it could be interpreted in a different way. So I think it's important to make sure that you put what needs to be done, or your opinion, up next to your findings.
Karen, can I jump in again? Simon's come back on photographs with a different opinion. Let me just turn it up. So, is not a carefully and correctly framed photo illustrating a specific defect detail very helpful to a client? And Josh says the recommendation is a strange one. IMS module 04 section 4.9 is dedicated to photos and suggests appropriate photos should be added. As a boat owner reviewing a pre-purchase report for a boat I want to buy, I would even need to see photos.
Well, if you wish to put photos in, then I think you sort of do it at your peril, from my knowledge of litigation, because you've got to be absolutely clear that you haven't missed anything in that photo that at a later date would cause a problem, because it could be used by a claimant to say you didn't comment on something. If you're confident, then put it in. If you're not confident that you've commented on everything that's in that photo, then don't put it in. But at the end of the day, the decision is up to the individual writer. We've come across more problems with claimants using photographs to show that a marine surveyor was not competent because they didn't comment on what now their client says was important to them and would have been important to them had they commented on it in the photograph. So you take that chance if you put a photo in, but you must make sure that you do, and you have commented on everything that you think your client will find, and that is he will find or she will find relevant, and you believe is relevant to them. So
actually, Jerry, first of all, says, I take the attitude that if you are going to mention it in the report, be able to stand over your statement and have loads of backup info and pics, avoid ambiguity and extra words that don't add any value. What I would say is we see obviously a lot of reports at IMS, and it's very common to see a lot of photos used. It's not uncommon, but I think what Karen, indeed, what we've always taught at IMS is certainly in a pre-purchase report, you would perhaps, as Karen says, just be careful what goes in there. It might be entirely different if you're doing a damage survey report. You may well need to publish, dozens and dozens of photos to explain the damage. But I don't know we'll reach total agreement on that. He says, agree with Karen, repick, and what's in the pic should only be relevant to the comment and nothing else in the pic.
Absolutely. And that means you have to be very careful what you're putting in the report. And as I said, from litigation point of view, Mike, we've come across a situation where they've used pictures to suggest that the marine surveyor was not competent because they were not picking up other areas, and they scour these photographs really carefully, and you'll be amazed when somebody gets upset as a purchaser because they've bought a boat for £50,000 and found they've got to spend 20,000. They will go through those photographs that you've put in, and they will scour them to make comment on the fact that they're concerned that X, Y, and Z wasn't commented on, but it was clearly visible in the photographs. So you take the chance. If you put them in, you've got to make sure that you've definitely dealt with everything that's visible on those photographs.
Tony's added another comment. I take it photographs aiding general vessel identification, general position, possibly vessel environmental condition at time of survey could be helpful, including the phrase without prejudice. Jerry goes on to say court will want the original pic, so if a snip is taken and included, the whole pic will be required there. I mean, Karen, whenever we do these report writing seminars, photos are a big discussion point.
Yeah, I mean, use a photograph, but you must be aware that if you have a claimant that, and particularly an upset claimant that thinks that they're not going to get money or that they need money to undertake the repairs, and they believe it was their losses has been caused by the surveyor, they will go through those photographs with a fine-tooth comb, and they will, and they do go through, particularly if they've got upset. I won't use the word vindictive, but if they've got upset, they will go through the fine-tooth comb and they will write to their solicitor and say, well, she and he didn't pick up this, they didn't pick up that. That just shows how bad they are as a surveyor. And it's just human nature. They will do that. And more so if they feel that they're losing their case, and you'll find that they will identify, because it's, you have to understand that somebody who hasn't got the money, bought a £50,000 vessel, found they've got to spend 20,000, hasn't got the money to do it, they'll be making sure that they find everything possible to achieve their goal.
Ray has popped up. Nice to see you online, Ray. I've included photographs of findings only, but not making the report a broker's brochure. Many insurance companies, of course, as we know, will request photographs.
Oh, yes, that's a different kettle of fish. You're writing for the insurance company, and you're writing, but if you're sending to when I say client, I mean somebody who's purchasing the pre-purchase. Insurance companies will want it, particularly if you're dealing with issues of damage, because they'll want to see what you're doing. So that's a different kettle of fish. I'm talking about if I was purchasing something and this report was for me. I don't think I have ever seen, and I've bought a lot of properties, Mike, and the comparison is very similar. You won't find photographs not I've ever seen. You won't find photographs in land surveyors' reports unless they're doing it for the purposes, perhaps, of litigation, and it needs to be proven. Then they'll put it in if you've asked them to instruct them. But I've never seen a report, and I've had very, very long reports, 10, 12, 14 pages, and I've never seen one photograph for a purchase report. And they don't do it, Mike, because they know that, and there's a lot of litigation on it, some of which my husband was involved in at the end, particularly in the 90s, Samson, because they can be picked up on stuff. I'm not saying they don't take photographs. I'm saying they don't put them in the reports.
So let's move on, Cam. But Simon says, come back and said, over the past 26 years, survey photos have got me out of trouble and have never created more problems. Perhaps the problem is the survey and the reporting and not the photo. And Josh has popped in to say, I think it is more a case that surveyors should be qualified and experienced in their field and therefore be able to put photos in the report which add value.
I don't disagree with any of that, but just coming back to what I said, if you put a photograph in, just make sure there's nothing in there that you've missed and you haven't commented on. That's fine, put them in, but if you put them in, make sure that you double and treble check that there's absolutely nothing in there that you haven't commented on.
It's good advice. And actually, Josh wraps up by saying they themselves, the surveyor that is, should be reviewing their photos in detail after the survey when archiving the photos as a matter of course. I think that's all good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's excellent idea. Yeah, I think it is.
Okay,
right, we're on the top side. Oops, I just turned over. Sorry, Mike, I just lost my sheet. I've gone backwards. I've gone back into the wrong way from the GP vessel. So I just want to yeah, most of this here, as I said, is to do with issues of. I'm just finding my notes, Mike. I've just managed to turn them over, so
that's fine.
Just bear with me. Description. I'll find it in a minute. Most of these here are to do with the again, timescales, etc. And you see, see, this is again. Think about your construction. You've got a recommendation there, and you talk about shell external, and you've got. I know the recommendation deals with. I'm just going to go back a slide because we're talking about the general shell external, and then there was a recommendation. And then we're talking about top side. The first paragraph. Am I supposed to do something with it? Something's been found that was felt to be necessary to advise on chipping. Should I be doing something? Should I not be doing? I'm reading this as the client now, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know. And then I'd have to put a little asterisk or a note there just to remind myself, as to go back and to look at it as a client. The next one, rust from anchor well drains staining the top side. Is the recommendation to clean it off with anything? Do I just leave it? I don't know. Is it doing any harm? Again, the word serviceable. That's not probably such a bad use of it there. Do I need to do anything, or because they've been welded? Do we need to get the weld checked, or is it of the opinion of the writer that the welds are adequate and therefore nothing needs to be done? I'm not sure about the word serviceable, but and you said the ladder swings down freely, so that's just a comment to show that it's been done. Okay, we're on to davit brackets. I think the first probably paragraph is a factual thing that's been found. Below waterline seems to be quite factual. This is fresh anti-fouling. I don't know you probably would say, but you can't say, I would just say there appears to be fresh anti-fouling data unknown when done and applied over previous coats. Is it unfortunate? Is it too thick a coating? Should it be removed? I don't know. It says finished rough, flaking in places. Is that important? I don't know. A few random sections scraped through for anti-fouling. Do you need a note somewhere to keep contemporaneous note to show where you did them? You probably have your photographs anyway. No obvious epoxy coating found. Is that relevant? Do I need to do something because nothing's found? That's a question which I would have to ask. And it says no significant surface defects. Is that, again, the word significant? I know if you look on a mathematical scale, we use the word 5% as significant if you're going to do mathematics. But to a person, if I was purchasing, what is significant and surface defects noted? Is there any defects that I need to deal with, or is it just that there are there cosmetic defects which nothing needs to be done? I think that needs further explanation. Underneath it does go on to say if a smooth finish is required existing. I wouldn't put that as an NB. I think it's something which should be put in that, so that you're looking at three things again: facts, opinion, recommendation. If a smooth finish is required, existing anti-fouling should be cleaned off and fresh anti-fouling applied over suitable primer. Does it need a smooth finish? Is going to be a problem not being a smooth finish, or are you going to put as recommendation that if the client wishes to have a smooth finish, it should be cleaned off? It's something which I think one needs to think about. Okay.
Just before you go on, Karen, so I'm just keep feeding them in. Comment from Paul Homer. In my 40 years of surveying, I've had 6 cases where a photo has caused the surveyor to be sued for not making sure there's something in the photo that hasn't been mentioned. And he says he personally would not recommend putting photos in.
Well, I follow the same stance as Paul. I agree with him. I think you put it in at your peril, and you have to be absolutely sure, not tired the time that you're doing your report, making sure you check it and you go back over and making sure that there's nothing in those photographs that can cause you a problem. But it's down to the individual. If they want to put it in, that they have to be absolutely certain that they've covered every issue that may be obvious in the photograph. And I think I agree with Paul. I think it can cause more problems. Now we're talking about pre-purchase here. I'm not talking about sending to insurers or for litigation purposes, etc. And we're talking about pre-purchase surveys. It's different for your client if your client is an insurer, because they may need or require or always want to have photographs for their files. Okay, right. Keep proof of calibration. There's a moisture reading comment here. One of our claims many years ago couldn't be defended because there's no proof that the moisture meter had been calibrated correctly. So keep a note somewhere, make sure you've got your dates, etc., to prove calibration. Or put a note in somewhere at the end if you want to reference note or something calibrated on such and such a day, so it's in the report at the end. It says it does not give definitive moisture levels within the laminate. So if you read it, the meter readings give a comparison between the areas of the hull and water and those normally immersed. It does not give definitive moisture levels within the laminate. So should you be going on to say, therefore, the amount of moisture within the laminate can be significantly different to, I don't know, should one go on to say something? I think there should be something additional there, because to make it absolutely clear to the client that the levels could be actually higher or lower than the readings, because it can't give a definitive moisture level reading. I just think it's be easier just to add something short on the end there. The next bit I think are quite factual. I'm not sure what generally moderate means, and high readings in lower bilge areas. Is it important to me, the high readings? I don't know. The moderate and deep areas were low to moderate on the shallow scale. Again, it sort of raises questions, as I said. Topside low to moderate. Should I be doing anything? It's probably in the NB at the end. I'll have a look. Given that the boat had just dried out between tides, the below water readings compared favourably with topside readings, I do not suggest any osmosis problems. The statement is that it's dried out between tides. Is that relevant? Could it mean that the water readings could be significantly higher? Is that a comment that should be made for the purposes of me, the client? That's something which I think probably needs to be expanded on. Right, we've got an NB here. To facilitate drying of the hull and the boat is laid up, all bilge and locker spaces should be opened up as far as possible. See, that's a form of recommendation because you're telling them to do something. So, or your opinion, you can't say no opinion, if the boat is laid up, we would suggest that locker spaces should be opened up as far as possible, kept dry and good through ventilation, or it's either, it's either opinion of what you're doing or it's a recommendation. Okay, right, we're on to internal. Again, same comment about restricted as I've said before. I think you should expand on what's restricted, quote necessarily what you want to quote out of your terms and conditions, your contract with your client, make sure it's absolutely clear. And I've put a note underneath this. It says in the accessible areas, the hull, shell, and all the visible moulding, transverse and longitudinal stiffness found to be sound, except in the way of damage to transom as noted in the section above. Do you need to say what the accessible areas were? I would probably put them down to the client to say, we managed to access the following areas, or we're not able to access these areas, so it's absolutely clear. I made a note down here, say here you need to cover yourself because it's possibly not possible to confirm X, Y, and Z. So make sure it's absolutely clear because you're talking about areas that you can't access, and we have a lot of attempts at claiming against surveyors for them not making it clear what could or couldn't be accessed and why you didn't access it. And we've had one or two where they have referred to their terms and conditions, possibly not clear enough though. And then there's been an argument the fact that they could have accessed something. So if you feel you haven't accessed it, just make it clear. We did not take X, Y, and Z off. We didn't undo this. I think we had one, Mike, where somebody could have just turned a couple of bits, not with screwdrivers, and actually just lifted it out. And that was probably an oversight, and that did cause a problem. Okay, we've got the NB again here. And I've just put a note down. It says water collecting the bilge area from fore cabin, after saloon and engine compartment. Well, that's a factual thing. I think that should be in the factual part, not as an NB, because it's something which has been found. Your opinion is it's come from the water leaking past fastener. You believe it, so therefore it's your opinion. Fastening for deck fittings and leaks to the cabin windows. Further investigations required. Do you need to suggest they go and see somebody that's an expert in it? Should they get a costing? Could it be very expensive? What's the timescale? Should it be done before they take it out? It says in addition to standing water, bilge and locker areas tended to be somewhat grubby and damp. Does that mean that they need to be investigated? And again, comment engine compartment water and all these are factual things. I think they should be quite clear that it's the facts that have been found. So again, keep your facts, your opinion, and your recommendations clear, and keep the paragraphs separate as well. I think that's probably, in addition, I would put that as a separate paragraph. I would say standing water. I would say bilge and locker areas were found to be grubby and damp. Be clear, they were, and that's what your findings are. And then I do engine compartment water, oily. I put that as a separate paragraph. There's separate issues that you're dealing with. Okay. Any more questions, Mike? Or are we ready to?
We're up to date at the moment, Karen.
Okay. So what I've just dealt with, I'm just going to recap, is what I've shown you in the last bit is keep it separate when you're commenting on areas. Because I'm just going to go back once more. You can see that all of that is in, okay, it is under shell internal, but you're dealing with different issues there. You're dealing with the after, the saloon and the engine compartments. Keep it separate. And it's easier to read when you're tired because you've got each section separate, and don't put it in one paragraph. Okay, I think you all know by now. I don't like an undefined word like serviceable, so that I think would need to be. Again, it is believed to be of. Is it your opinion? It is, but it needs checking, but you're not sure. Make it clear. Right, on to, I think timber toe rails. I think there's a factual paragraph I put next to it. Sorry guys and girls. The cockpit. I've highlighted some damage to slats on forward grating. Remains serviceable. Again, serviceable. I think you already know that's a word that I would probably not use unless it's defined as to what you mean it. The MB again, gratings. Serviceable condition, but some reinforcement straps are fitted to gratings. And let's go down. Right, cockpit. Again, as you get it says part of the seating is such a large cockpit, forward cockpit in front of opening. I'm just going to go down to the Treadmaster paragraph where you can see that the word generally secure. Again, I don't use those sorts of words unless I explain what I mean by generally secure. Are they secured? Should they be secured? Should they be checked? And do they need to do something? Are you going to tell them in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, or 3 years' time, or 3 months, or 6 months' time that something's going to need replacing? You found them worn and grubby, but You know, are most of them secured around the edges? Do they need to be checked? I think that's an important comment. We're going down to the mouldings one now. Comment there, cosmetic considerations. Okay, that's fine. Overall, no significant defects. Again, significant. If you're going to use it on a factual basis, as a mathematician, we look at 5%. What does it mean to the reader? I think that probably needs more explanation as to, are there cosmetic defects that are not, you know, and do you need that in? If you're saying all of these are cosmetic considerations, do you need the comment overall no significant defects? Because you've already said that they're all cosmetic. So again, you know, I think that needs to be carefully thought out, you know, the phrasing of it. I'm looking at paragraph 1 again. I think the first 2 sentences are factual. So we're going through, you're probably seeing this pattern now. We're looking at facts, opinion, recommendations, the same as a judge would want from an expert report. And at the end of the day, your reports could end up in front of a judge. So take the same structure on board. Do it in that fashion that a judge will be reading it as you were the expert to the client. You then become the defendant, and make sure that you make it clear that facts, opinion, and recommendation. Your facts are your findings, and your opinions should be made clear, and your recommendations should be clear. And don't forget every time, which I know I've mentioned several times, to make sure that the client considers what they need to do in the future within a timescale of what you've found.
So, Karen, I've got a cracking question from Fergus. With a novice purchaser, well, we know a lot of them are novice purchasers, they appreciate the report, but then they expect the surveyor to train them on boat maintenance. How can this be a
Oh, Fergus, that's a wonderful comment. Thank you. Yes, they do. And when you haven't trained them and they don't understand, they sue you because it's cost too much. Yes, it is a problem. That's why I think you need to draw to their attention, these novices, to make sure that they get an estimate, a quote or something from somebody about the cost of what you found that might need repairing. Because the number of times that they've said, oh, we didn't know it was going to be that costly. Well, tell them, even somewhere at the end in the summary, that it's up to them to ascertain what the cost will be from the recommendations and your suggestions that you found. Put the onus back on them to go and find. It's up to them to find the suitable people. You're not the repairer. You are not the person who should be giving a quote on the cost of repairs. They need to go and find somebody, and once they've got your report, they need to go and get somebody in to take a look at it to say, this is what my surveyor expert has found. How much do you think it's going to cost? Give me a rough idea, or you know, as much as they can without destroying the vessel, because they won't be allowed to, Mike. So yes, I totally agree with him, and it is getting worse. And you need to cover yourself by putting the onus back on your client for them to go out. You're not babysitting them. You're not there to hold their hands through everything. You're there. You're doing an MOT on the day, and you're telling them what they may need to do in the future within certain timescales, and then you need to get them to go and find out what the costs are.
It also raises the other question, Karen, as to when a surveyor becomes a consultant, and that's a different hat, and that's playing by a different set of rules. So that needs to be careful as well.
Yes, I mean, I don't know, consultancy, that's very interesting. Are you being a consultant to a third party, or are you being, it depends on what you can only have certain, the courts only recognise certain legal statuses. You're either the principal, you're either an agent, or you are a contractor, consultant. You know, at the end of the day, they don't recognise. Well, I'm ignoring the issue of, if you take your coat into a dry cleaner, yes, they are a bailey. So I'm not going to go into absolutely everything, but because they become a bailey, and therefore under the law, they have certain obligations as a bailey. So if they lose your trousers and whatever, so that's different. So you can become a bailey, but but the main thing, you're a principal, you're an agent, as a principal, you'd be in the contractor. You're contracting to them. As a consultant, it depends on who your consultancy agreement is with. And although the word is recognised, that when you look in the case, you'll find that you're going to have certain legal relationships with parties. I'm not sure if that's clear, Mike.
Well, no, Fergus says, thanks, Karen. In short, our job is to find the problems, not to fix them. And that's absolutely right. Jerry says, different liability issue between being a surveyor and a consultant. And David's chipped in to say, after recommendations, noting it is recommended to secure professional estimates for all recommendations to establish additional costs and budget.
Wonderful. Oh, perhaps we could have that in an email. That's very nice. Would you kindly put that in an email to you and forward it on so I can keep that as something to remind people to put in? Because that's a wonderful summary. I think that's excellent.
I'll get a copy of all of these chat messages at the end, so I can take it straight from there. So thank you, David.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent, and that really does make the point, because you're covering yourself, and it's so important. I just want to go back to consultancy. That is a bit of a nebulous term. You've just got to look at your legal relationship that the court acknowledges and accepts. You're either a principal or an agent, etc. We call people call ourselves, I'm doing consulting business, but your legal relationship depends on what your contract. It doesn't matter what word is in it. They will look at your contract, agreement between you, or what you're doing if there isn't an agreement, and they'll make a decision as to whether what you are to the party involved that you're dealing with. So, okay, right, we're on to. I'm going to just deal with the last bits. Serviceable. You know what my opinion is on that. It says well secure, except that the admin shaft joint to Starboard is opening up with Sheila. Again, it raises the same questions. Although there it's got an MB, I would put them as I would say your opinion is no immediate action is necessary. But the recommendation is to loosen scarf joint should be reglued at the next suitable opportunity. And you can go on to say, I wouldn't say next suitable opportunity. I think you need timescales, because people get sued for no timescales. To them, a next suitable opportunity could be 5 years when they decide to go to go out and get somebody to lift it out or to do something. Put your timescales in. The joints were not generally visible. Again, generally visible. I think you need to make it clear. Generally, I would avoid that word, which I've said before. Bulkheads, we've dealt with accessibility here, but where accessible found to be sound and secure, I think you should say where it was accessible. If you can explain it, if you can't explain it, can you do the reverse and say what wasn't accessible? I think my voice is going, Mike. I'm trying to get through this.
We're hanging on your every word.
Okay, let me see how much we've got to go. Oh, we're nearly there, Mike. I'm going to try and whiz through. I know I said 2 hours, but I think it's important, some of this. I'm going to mention again, don't override your terms and conditions, your contract with your client. Make sure that you quote or refer directly to your terms and condition points that are relevant. I've mentioned about soft furnishings, always put an exclusion. I would just say their internal structure. I put one sentence and say, we refer you to paragraph 10.3 in our terms of terms of business, whatever you call it, or contract, whatever. We do not comment on soft furnishings. And it's in there, it's listed in your terms and conditions. You don't have to put anything else in. Again, good standard. What's good standard to you? I might be aghast with. I've got a friend who's got OCD. One scratch on the worktop would mean that it is not a good standard. So you have to make sure that you make it clear what you're talking about, good standard. You can do it in different ways. Everybody's got a different opinion. You can either write it in full here, or perhaps you want to put it in some form of key for that section, or for the whole report. Harder, I'd suggest for the whole report. But you decide how you want to do it. No significant defects. Again, we're talking about 5% or whatever. What is significant to you or me will be totally different, I suspect. You can say, again, generally wouldn't use that. I say varnish finish is sound. What does that mean? Again, subjective. Right, on to mast and support. I mentioned about it says aluminium alloy shoe secured to the coach rooftop. How do you know it's aluminium alloy? Should it be aluminium alloy? Is that relevant to me? I think it's important to say that if you've got the information from a brochure or whatever, say where you've got it, or we can say it appears to be aluminium alloy, it should be, but you can't confirm it. You say no defects noted externally on the mast support. I suspect there are defects, in my opinion. Perhaps there's a scratch somewhere. What is a defect? Should you say there may be cosmetic scratches, but they're not noted, whatever, but there's no defect that's going to affect its structural use? Is that what we're saying? So think about it. So it says no defects noted externally. Defects normally are structural, because we talk about defects in terms of litigation. A defect is something which needs to be repaired. So, but again, it's always difficult in litigation to say, would a court consider that a defect, and why would they consider it? Is it because that scratch will cause it to rot in 10 years' time? Is it because such and such? Is it a defect? So I would make it clearer. What's a defect to you or to me may not be to you. So I would think you need to be clear. And I'm looking at it from the opinion, as you all know now, as if I was the judge looking at it as to what it means, and also the client. And they are the two important people that you need to keep in mind. Serviceable condition, again, we've been through that. Right, heels. Again, we've been through this cast iron build kills. How do you know they're cast iron? you've got to say why, I think. Okay, and it says kills well aligned. I'm not a surveyor. Does it mean they are aligned? Should they be aligned? It says well aligned. Are they not aligned? I don't know. You know, those questions I've got. We've got NB here. The first part of that before the comma is a factual thing found, so I think that should be in a factual part. I don't think it needs an NB. I think that should be factual. Flexible filler, fairing mastic, kill stop, kill joints, rough and working loose, full stop. Recommendation, breaking out and reapplying. Reapplying what? I think you should do time scale again. And we're looking at the kill surface section here. I've got quite a lot here just to say. There's again no significant defects. Are we talking about cosmetics? Do we need to expand on what the defects noted externally? If it says no significant defects, there must have been a defect then, but you don't consider it significant. So I think you need to expand on that. Okay, and then we've got likely of little value. Significant depletion on both, but likely of little value and replacement not required. What does it mean by little value? Does it mean that they don't do anything, or are we talking about its actual value? I think it means they're likely of little value. Little value to what? To stopping what? To stopping deterioration or something. I think you need to go on to explain, because I don't think that the reader will sort of understand. And again, we've got internally moulded transverse stiffeners and killed fast things, both port and starboard, found to be sound. What do you mean by sound? No significant defects noted. So are the defects, are they cosmetic things that you found? I think it's important to tell the reader. All right, watertight integrity. Got essentially there. Is it watertight or is it not watertight? If it's essentially watertight, does it mean it's leaking at all? Shall I be doing something with it? Again, looking at next to it, hatches, elderly but no significant defects. Again, what does that mean to me? Are you saying there's any cosmetic scratches or something? You said actually no evidence of leaks internally. Great. Main hatch. I would probably go on to explain to the reader that your findings are that it's a horizontal sliding section, 2 washboards, which does it function correctly? Do I need to do anything with it? Which is adequate for the main hatch. Horizontal section. There's acrylic panel on timber trims, slides and alloy channels in GRP hatch garage, a serviceable condition. Well, we've spoken about serviceable again. And then we're looking at 2 clear acrylic washboards, some UV cracking to acrylic, but panels remain in serviceable condition. For how long? How long can they be used for before I need to do something? Should I be getting checking on the price? Is it going to cost a lot of money? That's things to think about whilst you're there. Is the UV cracking, is it going to suddenly go? To me, UV cracking on acrylic, knowing what acrylic is like, it could go at any moment. It means it's gone brittle. I've just managed to break a UV acrylic window. So, if I closed the window and it was acrylic and it had cracks in it and it suddenly went, I'd be saying to the surveyor, but you didn't tell me it's something which could suddenly go. This is going to cost £600. Can you please cough up? Timber trimmer channel weather remains serviceable. The consideration should be given to means operable from inside out to secure the hatch shut in severe conditions. So, I would say up at the hatch bit, further up, I would say that no securing mechanism. Say there, I would put up in the hatch bit what closure is, and I would say there that no means of securing was found, and then I would comment on it further up as recommendation is to I think his recommendation here is to put, isn't it, give them to put a means of securing and suggest you get quotes or whatever to do it. I don't know what the cost is. It says ideally when the boat is commissioned, the washboard should be secured to the boat with lanyards to prevent them being lost overboard in severe conditions. I'm not quite sure where you put that, but so are you saying that the washboards aren't secured? Then that needs to go factually somewhere at the top. Washboards found not to be secured, or is it the fact that they are secured, but they need to make sure that they need to be secured to prevent them being lost? I don't know what the answer is to that question. Right, watertight integrity. I think the first bit's probably okay. Some people might have slightly different opinions on it. We've got the, I think what the word there, good combings, good again. What does it mean to people? I think that's, I'm not sure what substantial GRP moulding means either. Because just commenting on things, what does it mean to a person substantial? Like cabin windows, some evidence of leaks. Do I need to do anything? You know, it's got an MB underneath. You know, so I would put their corrosion to the frame, some leaks, forward photo reports. I would put underneath recommendation is to I put a timescale of when they need to be refurbished, because leaks are one of the biggest problems with anything that you own. So I would put a time frame and get them to consider what the cost is going to be, because they might find it's astronomical. I don't know. Right, I think we're whiz through this. And I do skin fitting. Yeah, we're all skin fitting now. Okay, I'm going to try and get through a lot of this. Again, I would put recommendation there. If you're reading it, it says about skin fittings was scraped. No evidence of I would say recommendation is to, you know, should be freed off. Does it mean that they found them found to be unfreed? So I think a comment needs to be made before about what you've actually found before you make the wheel binding should be freed off. Toilet inlet. These, always be conscious of your terms and conditions. I've mentioned it before. Make sure you think about what you are not doing and what you are doing. Switch testing, I'm going to mention. Always make it clear if you're just switch testing something electrical. Always refer, I think, to your terms and conditions. Whichever way you want to do it, make sure it's clear to the client, then for them to go back and read what you're doing and what you're not doing. And don't. We've had lots of problems with people commenting on things. We've just had a recent case where somebody's had a problem because there was a problem with a water container, and it should have been made clear that you weren't checking, it wasn't being checked, etc. Do make sure what you are and not checking, and what you can't comment on, and what they might, you know, and what you cannot say for certain, and therefore there could be additional costs to them once they start to use the vessel. Always think all the time that a client's going to come back to you on money. It's money they're spending, and that's the important thing to address all the time. You want to make sure that they are responsible for checking what they're going to have to pay out. So you're not there as insurance policy for them when they find out that something costs nearly the same cost as you know, the value of the vessel. And make sure on these that if you're going to comment, it's an engine that's also outlet. You know, hosing way of the skin fitting sound, slight surface corrosion on skin fitting. Do I need to do anything? It says 2.8 for further comments. It was also hose pipe. We'll get there in a minute. I don't know till we get there what the relevance is to this. So I think that this would need to. I would have put more sort of. I would reconsider toilet inlet, what's been written, wash hand basin, and engine. Okay.
Can I jump in, Karen?
Yeah.
So this is from Tony. Hi, Karen. Do you have any comments or advice in respect to the legal effects or legal nuances pertaining to electronic mailed reports and a survey report delivered through the Universal Post Union? What is the essential legal differences between them to consider? Will this really helpful briefing be available for download? Yes, absolutely it will. We'll make it available to everybody afterwards. He goes on to say, my last question on photographs: can a photograph taken which is produced and used in events during litigation be used against the surveyor if it was not included in the original report, or is this something that we are not too concerned about? And just to finish off, because there's one more here, Josh says, to add to Tony's question, if a case goes to court, can a judge legally request access to all photos and other documents and notes referring to the survey in question? There's quite a lot to unbundle there, Karen.
I think the first one, Mike, you'll have to send to me. I'll have to address that separately if you don't mind. Just send it as a separate email, because I can't deal with it now. Yep. We'll be here. Okay. We'll be here all night, Mike. I have to deal with it. In terms of the questions, which I'm not sure whether I'm going to cover everything. If I don't, Mike, send it on. A judge can decide if he wants access to stuff, if he feels that things are being withheld. If it's relevant, it has to be relevant to the allegations. So the allegations are read. They can't. It's not. You can't go on a fishing expedition. Yeah, I'm very clear with lawyers when they write. As you all know, I still, although I'm an insurance broker, I also have a claims side. When I deal with them, you know, I make them specify what they want. So if they say they want a risk assessment, I make them put a date in and time, and I make them ask what specific risk assessment. They can't just ask, can I have your 360 photos, please? Because I want to trawl through them and prove that you didn't comment on something in your report. You can't do that. They can just have what's relevant if they ask for it. If they write, if a claimant writes and says, we wish to have every photograph relating to the, I don't know, the outside of the vessel, the hull of the vessel that you have, then because our allegation is that you didn't undertake the work correctly, etc., then they're entitled to it. They're entitled to it if they're saying the whole of it. If they're just saying that there's only one tiny section up at the top somewhere that they found soft, then I don't think it's relevant that they have every photograph of the hull. They just have the area in question, there where the allegation is. So it's the allegation that drives the requirements for disclosure. The allegations are. Have I answered?
Well, Josh, Happy with that. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, so it's always look at the allegations. That's from the legal point of view.
Yeah, no, I'll pick up Tony's comment and I'll email that to you for further comment.
Yes, I've had to deal with that separately. And right, again, I'm just going to comment on cockpits down here. Close inspection required. I don't actually know, by whom, by when, dates. Possible rust and hose clips. Close inspection required. Will I have to do something? Will it have to be taken apart? Who needs to do it? I don't know. It's a question that questions that need to be addressed. All right, we've got bilge pump. I'm just going to go through. If you want to just make a quick note, otherwise we won't get through all the comments that I've got. I've got clip required, timescale, importance. Next paragraph, gas locker. See comments on locker drain 2.11. We'll deal with that in a minute. It makes quite clear no defects. I think that's probably okay. The cabin heater. The relevance there. I don't know if there's anything relevant that needed to be. It seems as if is it as expected? Or is it in it's a proprietary stainless steel heater exhaust skin fitted transmitter starboard are connected to the lagged metal exhaust pipe. What does that mean to me? Is that what's expected? And that it says no defects noted. It's always difficult to know with somebody who's purchasing a vessel or purchasing anything really, including houses. Right, transducers. Transducer plywood box structure which would contain any water if transducer unit were displaced. I'm not sure whether I understand that comment. Transducers in plywood box structure which would contain any water ingress if transducer unit were displaced. I just put a question mark next to it. We've got an NB here, and again I was looking at these for facts, opinion, recommendations. Okay, to look at. So is this your opinion that all seacock should be serviced annually, or is it a recommendation? You have to decide between, because they are two different things. Is this your advice? You can just advise if you want your advice that whilst in commission, you should regularly inspect and operate. If that's because you're giving a future, future assistance. The question is then, Mike, should you be doing this? Is it relevant? Or are you going to get yourself into trouble? Why, if you are doing what I call an MOT, you're doing on the spot with the recommendations that you get in an MOT, what needs to be done. Why does the surveyor, and this is sort of an open question for people to think about, why are you telling somebody how to look after their vessel in the future? I don't think it's necessarily relevant, but some people may think it is. But if you're incorrect in what you're putting in on a future thing, they can sue you on that comment that you've made. So when it says when the boat is in commission, all seacock should be regularly inspected and operated, what does regularly mean? It means something different. And do you need to hold that hand for the future? That is something which I probably wouldn't put in, but everybody may have a different opinion. If you do put it in, then you're giving yourself a risk in the future, because they may say their opinion of what regularly inspected may be quite different from yours. Theirs might be every 5 to 10 years. You might be thinking every 3 months. So I would stay away from that. When the boat is in commission, all seacock skin fittings should have suitably sized emergency softwood bungs available close by, wall hose pipe connections to skin fittings. Water lines should be clipped. Should the bungs have been in there already in the vessel? Is it saying that they weren't there? They should have been there. Or is it just something you're suggesting that they purchase? I don't know. At the end of the day, two quality standards clip that you have to. I think that needs to be looked at as to what the writer's trying to do or give as advice to the client, and do they need to give it? Is the question. I would stay away from future recommendations, because unless you've got something in your scope of work to say that you are going to give comments on what they should do in the future for things that you haven't found any problems with, then I think you should stay away from them, because it's not for you to tell them how to continually look after their vessel. You're doing your MOT on the day. Okay.
Karen, I have another good question from Josh. On a lagged exhaust, considering the recent MAIB report, should we state pipe not accessible due to lagging?
I think if it's not accessible, it's not accessible. And I think he's absolutely right. Yes, you can say not accessible due to lagging, so you cannot comment on the condition of it.
Yep.
How can you can't see it? I think it's absolutely. Excuse me, Michael. Again, recommendations, timescales, and I think that's important. Right, what are we up to now?
I've got one thing I want to wrap up with for you, actually, and for everybody else. There's an interesting news story broken this week that I need to share with everybody. So yeah, let me know when you're good to wrap up. We don't have to go through all the slides, Karen.
No, we're just going to look at this. I think probably the last one. We've got bilge pump arrangements. We're looking at it here. you know, again, if you're commenting on something, you know, I would just say, you know, you need to say, I think, why you're commenting on it. So it's just, you know, the following are just factual findings or something, to say that it's just factual, you know, reinforced plastic pipe, etc., which is acceptable, etc. Suction inlet not visible in some should be fitted with strong box, strain and also equipped. You know, I don't know urgency on there, and I've just put a note next to suction inlet not visible in the build, and my comments are, you know, is it not available to comment on, etc. But you know, and the relevance, you know, should it be checked? How can it be checked? What are the possibilities? You know, not visible in the build. I think that needs further expansion on. And just going to the NB again. You know, it says fit strainers to build pump suction, and then it said not so equipped. So should it say somewhere that it needs to be checked? I just need to go back and say that it's not, you know, I think it would need to say somewhere that you need to check if the, you know, if suction is if not so equipped. And again, you'll notice there's a comment: when boat is in commission, the pump handle should be stowed close to the pump and be secured to the boat with a lanyard. Is that relevant? That's a future thing. I wouldn't put it in. Okay, and I think we might have to stop there, Michael. We'll be here all night.
No, Karen, that's fine. And
you know, I think this is
it's all good stuff, and we just keep coming back to these things. And I just think that the report writing is really, for most people, is the hard part of the job. You know, this is where people really do struggle. And you get into semantics on words and phrases. And you're absolutely right. The story I always tell everybody, who I think makes people laugh really, is when I first got involved in this business and somebody gave me a report and it said heads on it. And I thought, what on earth is a head? You know, had something on my shoulders. But no, of course, it turns out to be, you know, toilets. So why not say toilet compartment? Because I don't know how many non-boaters would have a clue what heads means.
I don't think they would, Mike. I think that's absolutely, you know, your experience, I think, is invaluable, because I think it explains, you know, as a non-surveyor, that you know, we don't. I mean, I obviously know a lot more, Mike, because I do. I do. But what I've done here is I played devil's advocate and pretended I know absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so and you've got to assume. If I could just recap for 30 seconds, so you've got to assume that your client knows nothing. Lots of people like to pretend they know a lot because for some reason there's some lovely, I don't know what it is, they just like to say, oh, I know all about yachts, I know this and I know that. Just take no notice, just ignore the comments and just write it as if they know nothing, because if it has to come in front of a judge, he will probably know nothing. So make sure that you write it in that fashion.
Yeah, that's good advice. And all I can say, Carol, obviously is a big thank you to you. But if you ever decide to buy a boat, please don't ask me to come and survey it, because you just pull my report to pieces. Right, I want to close out for everybody, yourself included. I'd love you to comment on this. This story broke earlier in the week. We published it on the IMS website, but most people, I suspect, won't have seen it. Marine surveyor hit with US dollars, so $70,000 settlement after a subcontractor error. This is really interesting. So I'm going to just take some of the bits from here, from the report. A single technical error by an uninsured individual has resulted in the marine surveyor being hit with a $70,000 settlement, and it's prompted ITIC to warn ship and marine surveyors of the financial exposure they face when relying on third-party data without contractual protection. The dispute arose after a marine surveyor was appointed by a prospective buyer to confirm that a commercial fishing vessel met the requirements of the relevant Maritime Safety Authority. As part of the survey, the surveyor instructed a third-party naval architect to provide technical information needed to calculate the ship's freeboard. The data supplied was wrong, which led the surveyor to report the wrong freeboard and to conclude the vessel's recorded lightweight in the existing stability book as being incorrect. Okay, just skip a bit. As a result of the incorrect information, the surveyor advised the buyer that the vessel required a full resurvey before it could enter service. In reality, the stability information documentation was accurate. The buyer subsequently incurred the cost of the unnecessary second survey and missed 3 fishing trips while waiting for clearance. Would you like to comment on that, Karen? I appreciate you haven't read the whole story, but you get the gist of that, don't you?
Yeah, so the person providing the information wasn't insured, is that what you're saying?
Correct, yeah. Exactly that.
Yeah, you should always check that people are suitably insured. And it's a requirement. And if you read, I'm not saying all professional indemnity, but even mine, it's a requirement. If I use a third party, I have to make sure they've got insurance. Alternatively, I have to put them on my insurance to make sure that they've got cover. And
yeah,
this is what I discuss with everybody. When people come to me and say, "Oh, we want to use contractors, consultants, whatever you want to call them, they're third parties," I say to them, are they going to have their own insurance, or are they going to be on your insurance, which is almost like equivalent to being an employee. And so there's no subrogation rights against them, and you have no rights. So subrogation rights are the rights that insurers have when they pay out. They step into the shoes of the insured, and they have a right of recourse. So the question is whether it is not going to be any right of recourse against them, then you put them on as that. But you quite right, you should check. And then the other thing is, depends on the contract between what we're talking about, here, the surveyor, the contract with the client, and did who actually instructed who. We've had so many arguments over the years that I've dealt with about who really instructed. What you'll is, if anybody's dealing with very large projects, you'll get what happens is you'll get somebody who oversees the project, and they'll give advice, and they're dealing with the overseeing, but they don't engage any of the people that are going to do the physical work. It's up to in my case, I do a lot of ports, as insurance broker, do ports, and it's up to them to sign the contract with the third party, and they have to decide. So it's very important. I would always get the other party to sign the contract, and then if I was the surveyor in that situation, I'd have to make sure that they had proper insurance. Alternatively, I would say to the person who's engaged me, I'm not going to engage these. You select, you choose who you want as an engineer, whatever's going to produce the information. You sign the contract with them, and then it's your responsibility to check that the information they provide to me is correct.
Exonerated then from any comeback on you.
You are, because you're then not subject to what the contractual agreement is between, let's say, the marine surveyor and the principal, because it still may have a clause in it that says that they're responsible for any information they've got. But really, you do not want that, because you're not, it's not your field, and people have been sued, but for not selecting the right expert as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You have to know what you're selecting, so that would be a professional indemnity.
Yeah,
negligent as a professional.
So Ray has popped a question in. Good question. Is there a recommended length of time to maintain the photos and notes from an insurance end? I think in the UK we say 7 years. Is that right?
Wow, there's a 15-year long stop on the limitation.
15. Wow, yeah, 15 years.
Yeah, 15-year long stop. I can't remember when that can be broken. If anybody wants some reading for the evening, it's the Limitation Act 1980.
It might be different, Ray. It might be different in the States. I don't know. You need to check.
Yeah, I think it probably is. I was in the States. Yeah, I'm talking about the UK. The UK, we've got a Limitation Act. I don't know actually what it is in the States, and of course it will be different all through parts of Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do know that there's it's difficult, Mike, because people don't want to keep paying for a runoff cover. But you sort of you have to decide at what point you stop having insurance cover, and there is there is a long stop of 15 years. And the other thing to remember, that most insurances, people say, oh, I'm just going to close my company down, shut it down, it's going to be closed. Well, that's fine. You can't insure a legal entity that doesn't exist, and once you've closed it down, it doesn't exist. And therefore you can't. But then it can be reopened up. But professional indemnity is on a claims-made basis. And the problem that most people don't realise is that directors and officers can be liable under their own, as you probably know, Mike.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Directors can be responsible themselves, and a lot of people don't take directors and officers liability. And if you've been negligent as a director for some reason, that's a different cause of action, and it's a different type of insurance. But the actual allocations will be slightly different. But if you've got a lot of money yourself, and they found out that your assets are quite high, and particularly if you caused a death, then I don't think there'll be any tears lost from the claimant of making you bankrupt.
No, I'm sure that's right. Yeah.
So that's always a point to note. But people can't afford to have insurances for 15 years, Mike. So that's the reality of it.
So brilliant, Karen. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for being online. As I said, we'll make this all available, and in fact, we'll probably get an audio done of it as well. It chucks out an audio as well as a video. So for those of you who want to download and listen to it as a podcast, albeit a long one, then we should be able to do that as well. So we'll get that done. Tony will get your question answered and give that to everybody as well in the group who's been here, and the others who signed up. So Karen, thank you so much. And can I just wish everybody a happy Christmas? And if you celebrate Christmas and all that stuff, then may you have a good one.